No, there it is. Call the Ag, Rural Development and Housing Finance Committee to order. Quorum is present today, Wednesday, April 3rd, 2019. And members, we've got the omnibus finance bill. We're going to start with a list of testifiers and comments on the bill. And then we'll move into any markup and final passage before the committee adjourns today. We do have quite a list of testifiers, and we're going to start with a couple commissioners. And Commissioner Peterson, if you want to start, but ask you to try to stick to about 5 to 8 minutes. Commissioners get a little more latitude here. The rest, we need you to try to stick to about 2 minutes of testifying. So if you go over that much, you might get the chair in a gavel or a little interruption. So make you aware of that ahead of time. So I'll try to adjust accordingly so we can get through this and stick to the points that you want to make. That would be helpful for us to hear. So with that, Commissioner Peterson, welcome to our committee. You know the routine, and why don't we start with you?
Okay. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, again, my name is Tom Peterson. I'm the Commissioner of Agriculture for the state of Minnesota. I'm glad to be here today to comment on the budget. And I really appreciate so many of the items in the bill as we move forward in the dialogue we've been able to have with you and your staff and both parties and the senators as we've been going forward. In the interest of time, I'm just going to kind of focus on some of the concerns that we have in the bill and things that we'd like to continue to work with you as we move forward in this process. I will start with industrial hemp. We have concerns that there's no funding for hemp in the bill. With federal legalization of industrial hemp, interest in production is exploding across the country. We're concerned about what the message is that we're sending to those farmers and those businesses that want to do business in our state with hemp. And in this bill, with no support for it, that is a concern. Hemp is bringing tremendous opportunity to producers, but also competition is intense. In Minnesota, you have a map, I think, that's being passed out, where last year we had under 100 applications. We're close to 400 this year. Wisconsin is looking, we heard the other day, is at 2,000. Businesses are looking at where they're going to locate, how we're going to compete, and so this is really important to us. Law enforcement statewide continuously requests assistance from MDA to help navigate between what is hemp and what is marijuana. Oversight of hemp production is imperative to ensure that THC levels are not exceeded. Eventually, oversight for hemp licensing will pay for itself through collection of fees. It does not now, and however, that is the hope in the future. The program does not have a sufficient fund balance to do that at this time. The annual costs for the administrations of hemp licensing are estimated at $300,000 per year for 2020 and 2021. Without funding, the department will not have the ability to oversee and assist hemp production and processing in Minnesota. And I can just tell you, even right now, we're having to borrow staff to help move what is going through and what's coming in. It's exciting. At the same time, I think I'm going to have to help out if it keeps going. I mean, we are really that busy. It is very, very competitive. Our ag marketing is another piece that was something that we put forward. I've spent time visiting with our main commodity groups throughout the state. You know what we're facing right now in the state with the announcement last week that our ag economy is struggling. Our farm income is at the lowest it has been in the last 23 years. And what we also, you maybe saw the report yesterday, where we have 26% more soybeans than we had on hand in Minnesota last year at this time. And the market for where we're going to move them is challenged right now. And so we had a position in our bill to help move forward with that, and I think that is very important as we look at how we can help improve the economy in our state. Meat inspections was another request that we had. We are very busy with our meat inspections and looking at how we can do it as efficiently as possible, but the fact of the matter is that farmers do have wait times, and they'll continue to have wait times. So farmers in your district, when they want to go to some of the more popular places to process, they're going to be waiting. It also curtails some of the activity we have with new processors. I attended their convention 2 weeks ago, and it's exciting to see the business that wants to come into the state. But we need to fund that. We need to put it forward. That also leverages federal dollars. So in this case, we would have an opportunity to leverage dollars going forward. I also, we were disappointed to see the lack of funding for invasive and noxious weeds. That's something that the legislature funded before with Palmer Amaranth being such a tough issue that we're facing. Again, in Iowa, remember in 99 of the counties in Iowa, 60 of the counties have Palmer Amaranth. You look at Nebraska, North Dakota, we've been able to control it and contain it. But the important piece of that is grants and the work that we do at the department. And so we feel that that is a very important piece as well. Ag preparedness, also very important for our department. Every year, Minnesota's livestock industry contributes $7.6 billion to our economy. We're currently facing such threats that you know, such as African swine fever. And I want to be really clear on that. 2 weeks ago, we hosted, I think it was 29 different states in our department, and those were our emergency preparedness positions from all over the state veterinarians, some commissioners of agriculture, and other key staff, to look at how are we going to stay on top of this, and how are we going to be prepared for African swine fever. You might have saw too that it jumped a couple weeks ago from, they were saying it was at 2% of the herd to 20%. It jumped to Vietnam. We had the containers, the 50 containers seized in Newark of smuggled pork. This is a very serious situation. We need the staff, we need the dollars in the account to be ready for this disease. Plants and insects was another request that we had to help support our lab, to make sure that we identify new insects and diseases, and then also our lab equipment replacement fund. We talk a lot about our lab being world class. I've heard that for years. As commissioner, it's great to see, but we need dollars to continue to improve so that we can serve the farmers of our state, the citizens of our state. Part of our mission is also to protect our food security and our food integrity here in the state of Minnesota, and the equipment required to meet that is expensive. Putting off asset replacement risks the department's ability to provide those services and could threaten public health and safety. And putting it off, it increases the long-term costs and the liabilities to the department. Finally, on Agri, I would also just say that we are concerned about continued enhanced earmarks of Agri. I worked on Agri for a very long time, and we reminded us, we had this discussion in the committee the other day, the ethanol producer payments were very successful, whether you like ethanol or not. Those farmers, again, they took that to the bank. The banks made the loans, we got it started. Today we have 20 ethanol plants in our state, and as the Agri, and we paid off that, we created the Agri Fund. And as the department, we've worked hard to use those funds judiciously, but the other thing is very helpful is to be flexible in those accounts to meet the needs of our state. We're also concerned about the elimination of the Sustainable Ag Demonstration Grant, something I've been very familiar with, and is very interesting as a lot of different producers and items that were available. The final thing, I just mentioned two other quick things, is the reduction of our admin for Agri from 6.5 to 3.5. This would cause layoffs for us. It is very difficult. That's something that I'm very familiar with. As I've been commissioner now, and I'm looking at all these different grants and seeing the staff time, how we put these together, the reviews we do of the financials, of the business plans, they take time, and they should take time. We should be looking at the grants and not always giving it to the person who can fill a grant out the best. And I think this is very important. We bring in committees, we bring in other outside people. I've scored the grants in my previous job for many of these and appreciated the work that the department does. And it would just put us in a very tough spot. I would just also mention, I wasn't sure what, as we go forward, I do appreciate the funding for the farm advocates. I've told you before, I think that's really, really important. I understand maybe the funding for mental health will be in another bill, but I do appreciate the funding for mental health grants. So those are some things that we have concerns about, that we think there are opportunities that we hope that the committee considers and the senators consider as we move forward. We're willing to work with you on those and other pieces of the bill as we go to the floor and the conference committees. And again, I really appreciate the time, and the deputy would like to mention a couple of things as well.
Thank you so much. My name is Andrea Bob. I serve as Deputy Commissioner for the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Thank you so much for having me today. I just wanted to go on record and say how extremely disappointed I am with the bill that is before us today. It is not reflective of what we need to be doing for our farmers in rural Minnesota. We don't bring the things to you in our budget lightly. We take a lot of time and effort and work with our staff to figure out how we can make the work that we do work better and how we can serve farmers in Minnesota better. And so we take a lot of time and a lot of care before we bring these things to you. And I will also say that we talk a lot about FTEs, and they are so much more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. They are people, and we're looking at layoffs here. So for me, it's hard to look at this bill and feel like we're getting supported and that we're supporting our farmers in our rural communities. And so I really feel like we see it every day with the farmers that we talk to every day. It is tough out there, and people are struggling, and this bill should be investing in farmers and our producers around the state, and it should be giving them hope. And I don't see that in this bill, and so I just wanted to go on record saying that, and I sincerely hope that we can work together to get it in a place that can make a difference and help the people in Minnesota. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. Any further comments? All right, with that, let's go to Commissioner Groh.
Well, thank you, Chairman Westrom and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Steve Grove. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Employment and Economic Development. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to talk to you about the broadband piece of your bill, which is a very important part of the governor's budget for Minnesota. It's actually fitting we're talking about this today. Today is World Broadband Day at the Capitol. I met with several advocates this morning on this topic. A lot of excitement going into this session about our ability to finish the job and get broadband internet access to this entire state. And an issue that I will tell you is not a partisan issue. The people in that room that I spoke with this morning are advocates from all different political opinions, but share a belief that we want to be the kind of state where you don't have to move to a metro area or a big city to take part in the global economy, which is why this broadband task force and these broadband grants would indeed have been created, and why we believe they're really important to re-engage in this session. As you all know, in 2014, the state set a goal of border-to-border broadband access that by 2022, everyone in the state would have access to high-speed internet. The governor recommends a very specific amount to provide grants to help telecoms create access to broadband across the state. That amount is $70 million over the next 2 years. It puts us on a path to reach those goals of penetration by 2022. We know how much it'll take because we've ran a grant program for 5 or 6 years. We have run one of the best grant programs in the country. It is modeled in other states. It is written about in publications across the country as a model for how to get this done. And so we know that it will take $35 million a year moving forward to get to that goal by 2022. Your bill has one-time funding of $30 million and only funds 1 year. That's a 57% reduction in funding from the governor's level, and it will ensure that we do not, in fact, meet our statutory goal of ensuring that everyone in the state has access to broadband internet. That means 14,500 homes and businesses will go unserved over the biennium at this reduced funding level. I gotta say, we're disappointed to see this. Before this session started, we knew there was all kinds of issues we'd be debating. We kind of thought this might not be one of them. Broadband is not a partisan issue. It's something that affects people of all backgrounds. We had early great conversations about this with all of you, so we were surprised and disappointed to see that you came in at only $30 million and only 1 year funding for our broadband program. And it's because it's such a valuable way to grow our economy in this state. And don't take it from me, take it from the kind of people for whom broadband has completely changed their economic outlook here in Minnesota. We've got professionals in places like Rush City. It's a virtual marketing firm there called Businesses and Professional Services. Their owner, Terry Wheeler, said that lack of high-speed internet was completely crippling my business. And she tried everything to get access to the internet. She tried radio-based internet, she tried satellite internet, it didn't work. She considered moving to a big city, but once a broadband grant landed in the hands of CenturyLink and they were able to bring high-speed internet to her location, she can now video conference from clients from her home office in the woods and can build her business from there. Or look at Ralco Inc. in Balaton, a small community of 700 people. Their school shut down a few years ago, and so Ralco purchased that school and employs a number of people in the Balaton area. They had struggled for good broadband, but because of our broadband grant program, Woodstock Communications was able to bring fiber to those businesses, and today they're connected. And so this entire town has seen not only that individual business, but an old abandoned school become a thriving economic center for this town, and it's all because they're able to get internet and operate a great business there. Lastly, look at another rural town like Delavan. We had a couple named Greg and Lindsay Hain tell us that they once struggled with really unpredictable internet service, but today, through a grant provided through BevCom and Indeed, Greg, who's a local farmer and Pioneer seed dealer, was able to use his fiber connection to process orders across the state, to stream webinars to other farms, to teach them how to use his products. Lindsay, his wife, works for a consulting firm in Mankato as a CPA, and she was able to continue that work from home based on having broadband access to rural Delavan because of these grants. And again, these are areas that would not have broadband if we don't incentivize the market to put broadband there because they're difficult to reach with these lines. So these are just a few of the thousands of stories we hear across Minnesota. DEA deployed over $85 million over 4 years, including $35 million in 2016 to help increase access to broadband across the state. There's a robust pipeline of future projects ahead. It's not like we're not ready to do this again. We are. The minute we get funding in these coffers again, we can get going. We really want to make this a connected state, and the kind of state that, again, is a model for the country, or a place where you can be anywhere in the state and have access to the global economy and build a great business from wherever you are. So we really urge you to reconsider that number. To reconsider $70 million is the amount we need over the next 2 years to get this done. And I know we've got a lot of challenging work ahead and a lot of issues to work on together. We hope this is one where both sides of the aisle can come together and do the right thing. So we're excited to work with you on it, and thanks for giving me the chance today to share our perspectives indeed.
Commissioner, we will now move on to our next speakers. We'll tighten these times up then to about 2 minutes. So first up we have Dean Breyer, University of Minnesota.
Thank you, Senator Johnson, members of the committee. I'm Brian Boer. I'm Dean of the College of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resource Sciences at the University of Minnesota. I want to express my thanks to Chair Westrum and the committee for their support of the university, as well as support for the AGREE program that I'll talk about in this comment. As I testified about a month ago, AGREE legislation has resulted in investments of 21 new faculty doing research, teaching, and extension, and 10 new extension educators delivering programming across Minnesota. These positions are priorities of our 3 colleges, proposed by our faculty, department heads, and deans, and with the input from the advisory group of representatives from across Minnesota's agriculture, food, and forestry sectors. The funding required for these positions is recurring. That is why we're very concerned about the $2.5 million earmark out of AGREE that is proposed in this legislation. There is no other funding source for the AGREE programs underway. The $2.5 million proposal for soybean would cause that funding to be underwater immediately at about $1.4 million, which we simply don't have. This would mean potentially eliminating those positions immediately after hiring them, which is a disastrous outcome, both financially and in the larger context of AGREE, which I'll describe. We structured the AGREE positions to benefit as many constituents as possible. For example, hiring a precision nutrient management person in cropping systems, resulting in improved income for farmers and improved water quality and soil health across agriculture. We hired an antimicrobial resistance factor member in veterinary medicine, working not only with animals but public health professionals in addressing the issue of microbe resistance to antibiotic strains, another position that benefits all people. We've hired a person working in agricultural climate adaptation strategies, something that affects anyone who raises crops, and by extension, all people who rely on productive food systems. Importantly, AGREE came together with broad support of agriculture, food, and forestry sectors, and including the University of Minnesota, in a unique and collective partnership to have ongoing conversations to identify the highest priorities for ag, food, and forestry jointly, rather than for each individual area or organization. It's been a robust and important conversation for us to have, and I think uniquely positions us for greater future success in solving the grand challenges facing the food and agriculture sector. In summary, if the earmark appropriation of $2.5 million for soybeans goes forward, it will do two things. It will place CFAN's extension to the College of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Minnesota in an immediate $1.1 million deficit for AGREE, and it will damage a relationship that is strong and growing stronger between the University of Minnesota and across agriculture and food sectors in Minnesota. There is powerful potential for us to regain our leadership in many areas, but this legislation would weaken the opportunity to build and grow that relationship, which is really starting to come together. I respectfully request you reconsider the inclusion of this earmark from the AGREE in your Ag Finance Bill and remove it. Thank you for consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Kitzberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Dan Kitzberg. I'm the Legislative Director at Minnesota Housing. Both the Commissioner Hall and Assistant Commissioner Baumtrager are available today, so I'm filling in for them. I just want to start by saying how much we appreciate the work of the committee over the past few months. Housing truly impacts everyone, everywhere in the state. While the housing needs may differ depending upon where you are, we're glad for this committee's interest in addressing those needs statewide. I wanted to start by thanking you for not reducing programs that serve very vulnerable households, such as FHPAP, bridges, and the Housing Trust Fund rental assistance programs. And also thank you for including the governor's language in the policy bill to expand the radius for households eligible for the Manufactured Home Park Relocation Trust Fund from 25 to 50 miles. That said, we're disappointed that the committee didn't include the governor's recommended increases for proven programs like Homework Starts at Home. We also have a few overarching concerns with changes in the bill. First, the proposed reductions would result in less housing, both rental and home ownership, preserved and developed throughout the state. For example, reducing the funding for the Challenge program while adding uses and additional constraints, such as geographic distribution requirements, limits our ability to leverage other sources of funding and support economic growth throughout the state. The changes starting on line 44.27 limit our flexibility to work with communities to address local needs and will result in fewer affordable single-family home ownership opportunities in Greater Minnesota. The new requirements starting on line 45.31 will limit opportunities for applicants to leverage other sources of funding available. And finally, the reductions would result in fewer households, particularly households of color, becoming homeowners when we already have one of the widest disparities in home ownership in the country. Second, the language starting on line 33.11 limits our ability to be responsive to market-driven needs and will lead to people not being served by these programs. Adding requirements to split pools 2 and 3 resources geographically limits our responsiveness in helping homeowners buy and rehab homes. Unlike our appropriated programs, these are first-come, first-served programs, so they aren't allocated through an RFP or based on geographic or other requirements. It's also not clear how this requirement would be enforced or monitored. Third, adding new uses to the programs without additional resources or reduced resources would hinder our ability to meet those new needs. We also need to be sure that those new uses make sense under programs that award funds through an RFP. Finally, the language starting on 50.29 of the Bond Allocation Act limits the use of tax-exempt bonds to multifamily projects and severely limits the ability of communities to create new homeownership opportunities in the first half of the year and actually eliminates the ability in the second half of the year. So, Mr. Chair and members, we look forward to working with you and members of the committee in the remaining weeks of session to create a budget that helps meet the housing needs of more people throughout the state.
Thank you, Mr. Kitzberger. Next, we have Ms. Gauthier from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, followed by Vince Robinson. So if you want to get ready. Ms. Gauthier?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Greta Gauthier, Assistant Commissioner, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on Senate Bill 2226. And I also want to thank the author of this bill and the author of the underlying bill, Senate File 1414, for meeting with us to discuss our concerns. We do have concerns with this bill, specifically Section 22. So I will specifically on lines 25.5 through 25.7. The language is written very broadly and could be interpreted as not allowing the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to require manure management plan or pasture management plan for pasture areas that are in the vicinity, and vicinity is not defined, of a feedlot. While in our discussions, the authors assured us that this was not their intent, nevertheless, the language does say that. Many feedlot owners land apply manure from their feedlots to pasture areas in the vicinity of a feedlot. The adoption of this language would mean that there would be no controls on the application of manure to these areas. So it would eliminate also our ability to include a pasture management plan in a permit. And we have used pasture management plans as an important prevention tool, because if we can help livestock owners maintain their pasture and avoid turning it into a feedlot, then we're not creating feedlot conditions, and the likelihood of water quality impacts goes down. So those are a couple of problems that we see with this language. Once a feedlot, again, the word vicinity is vague and does not tell us how far away pastures could be and still fall within this exemption. The word is very wide open for interpretation and could include pastures that in fact are miles away. And finally, I have to speak to the language on page 26. Mr. Chair, starting at line 10, the natural deposit of manure by livestock on a pasture shall not be considered a discharge into the waters of the state and shall not be subject to any fine or penalty. This is an unprecedented exception to state water quality protections for both surface water and groundwater. No other activity receives such an exemption. I am not saying that all natural deposits of manure cause water quality problems, but the potential exists for a concentrated amount of manure to cause water quality pollution. In any other situation, if an activity pollutes the waters of the state, then that activity could be subject to a civil penalty. So again, this is unprecedented, and we think this is not the path that we want to go down in Minnesota. We want to protect our waters, public health, and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gauthier. Mr. Robinson.
Mr. Chair, members, my name is Vince Robinson, and I am the owner and president of Development Services in Ivanhoe, Minnesota, and I serve as the executive director for the Lincoln County Enterprise Development Corporation. I'm pleased to be a member of and to represent here today the Minnesota Rural Broadband Coalition. As the Commissioner said, Commissioner Grove, it is the Rural Broadband Day on the Hill today, and so we have quite a few people here, if you want to raise your hands, that are here as part of that Broadband Day on the Hill. We're here to support the border-to-border broadband grant program. As the Commissioner said, it's vital to not only our rural areas, but to our entire state. This grant program is one of the most important elements to sustainable economic future, and it touches, in our entire state, it touches all of our businesses, all of our citizens, and our state as a whole, and we don't want anybody to be left behind in this access to high-speed internet. Currently in Lincoln County, we're fortunate enough to have the opportunity to partner with Interstate Telecommunications Cooperative on a proposed fiber to the premise project in our county. Due to the terrain and distances, we're talking about half of our county being served through the project that is being proposed. It's an $8.5 million project. They are asking $6 million of the county of that $8.5 million. As you can imagine, with a county of less than 6,000 people. Coming up with $6 million is not an easy task. That's why we need your support in helping us to make this happen. Not only us, but many other areas of the state are in the same position. And we're woefully behind in today's world of internet. So while we appreciate the past support of the Senate in regards to broadband funding, the current proposal of $30 million in one-time spending is simply not enough. You've heard the Commissioner talk about some of the domino effects of not meeting the minimum speed goals that have been laid out, no chance of meeting the 2026 speed goals, which are 100 megabits per second down and 25 megabits per second up. And it perpetuates our feast and famine cycle that we're all too familiar with, which makes planning for implementation of any kind of funding on these projects extremely difficult. And we are spending way too much local capital on trying to put together studies and other things to support grant applications when we don't know if there's going to be grant funds available. So really what we need is some sort of longer-term sustainable funding if we can get there. So our coalition's goal is ongoing sustainable broadband funding now and for the future, and to leave no resident unserved. We have many projects ready to go. You've heard that in 2017, when we did have some funding, we had 70 applications, 50 million in requests. Many of those are still unserved and waiting out there, and we have many other opportunities. So, as I said, while we appreciate the sentiments of the 30 million, we strongly urge you to work with the House and the Governor and see if we can't get to that 70 million for the biennium, and make sure that all of us have access, because if we're going to realize the full benefit to the state, we all have to have access to good broadband. If you're a business or an individual who has good access now, doesn't do you any good if you're trying to communicate with somebody who doesn't have it. If you're trying to sell your products to those people who don't have it. And you can't get those people to support it either. So with that, thank you. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Next, Lorna Schmidt. Tim Rudnicki on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
Welcome to our committee. Identify yourself for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Lorna Schmidt. I'm the Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association, and I'm here today on behalf of partners of the Good Food Access Coalition. We know many difficult decisions were made as this budget was assembled, so we want to thank you for supporting the continuation of the Good Food Access Fund this year. With hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans struggling to access healthy, affordable food, and as you heard earlier in this session, with trends in rural grocery store closures threatening to make the problem worse, the need to do more to address Minnesota's food access challenges is urgent. Your support will help ensure that the progress we've made with the Good Food Access Fund continues, supporting farmers, grocers, and other small food retailers in need of financial and technical assistance. The severity of Minnesota's food access challenges vary across regions of the state, however. In communities facing the greatest need, we continue to see a financing gap between the capital required to establish or preserve a retail food operation and the capital that is available. As negotiations continue this session, we hope to continue working with you to explore additional opportunities to strengthen this investment. The Good Food Access Fund is important to health, but it also benefits local economies and creates market opportunities for Minnesota producers, making it an all-around smart investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rudnicki. And then Mr. Cruz is on deck.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Timothy Rudnicki. I am the Executive Director of the Minnesota Biofuels Association.
Get as close as you can to the mic, just so good audio for everybody.
First of all, we want to thank you and the committee members and other lawmakers for including the biofuel infrastructure program in the bill. And we look forward to providing all of you with more facts about how the biofuel infrastructure program can positively impact Minnesotans in rural communities as well as metro areas. And toward that end, for today's information pack, we've included some additional information already. But the question now is, how can we keep the biofuel infrastructure program alive and relevant for all Minnesotans? We've already talked about some of the successes upon which we can now build, and that includes, for example, the Department of Ag's handling and implementation of $14 million in the USDA BID program. And we've talked about some of the pent-up demand that exists among locally owned and independently operated fuel retailers to enter into another version of that program. And we've also talked about the research and data which substantiates the points we've made about the energy, economic, and environmental benefits of renewable ethanol in Minnesota. The state's funding for biofuel infrastructure creates a conduit for rural Minnesota. It's really about getting renewable ethanol to flow from the production to where the demand is in the markets that are seeking cleaner and less expensive transportation fuel. Toward that end, we will continue to work with all of you to determine the appropriate level of funding to keep the biofuel infrastructure program alive and relevant for all Minnesotans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rudnicki. Mr. Grooms and Mr. McQuarrie on deck. Mr. Grooms, welcome. Identify yourself for the record.
Mr. Chairman of the committee, my name is Lloyd Grooms. I'm here today on behalf of SEPI and the Bioeconomy Coalition. The Bioeconomy Coalition and SEPI wants to thank the committee for its support of the Bio-Incentive Program. Looks forward to continuing to work with you throughout the process.
Thank you, Mr. Grooms. Mr. McQuarrie. Ms. Johnson, Carrie Johnson on deck.
Thank you,
Mr. McQuarrie. Welcome to our committee. Identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Dominic McQuarrie, Public Policy Manager at the Amherst H. Wilder Foundation. The theme of my testimony is seriousness. So first, our state. We have a serious housing crisis in our state, and this crisis touches every part of our housing continuum in every part of our state. That's homeowners, renters, and people experiencing homelessness. Reports have come out this year from Housing First, the Minnesota Housing Partnership, and Wilder Research that all outline different aspects of this issue, but the finding is always the same. We're in trouble. The Wilder report showed a 10% increase in homelessness from 2015 and a 62% jump in unsheltered homelessness. These are our children, our grandparents, our neighbors, our friends, Minnesotans on the brink looking for a hand up right now. Which brings me to this committee. I think every member of this committee takes the issue of housing seriously. I've seen it. I've seen it in the meetings that I've had in your offices, in the questions that you've asked in committee. I saw it in the attention that you gave to the testifiers who came in to speak about the Homework Starts with Home program. And I know that you take the struggles of your constituents and their housing needs very seriously because you've told us. And it's at least part of the reason why you joined this committee. And lastly, to this bill. When it comes to housing, I believe this bill matches neither the seriousness of the issue or the members of this committee for how they approach housing. Again, in a time of large surplus, we have a zero target when it comes to housing, and flatly, I'm a little disappointed. This is not an issue that'll just go away or even stay the same without action and investment. You are representatives to leadership on a grave situation, and we need you to let them know what we're up against. I know this is just the beginning, and a lot can change before the end of session, and I'm excited to work with you to treat this issue with the seriousness that it deserves before we leave this spring. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McQuarrie. Ms. Johnson, Aaron McGee on deck. Welcome, Ms. Johnson.
Chair
Identify
Westrom,
yourself for the record.
Chair Westrom, members of the committee, my name is Carrie Johnson. I am the Senior Policy Advisor at NCCD and testifying today on behalf of the Homes for All Coalition as a policy co-chair. As you all know, the Homes for All Coalition has endorsed the membership representation in every county of the state. Our coalition has only continued to grow because Minnesota is in an affordable housing crisis, and every part of the continuum is being impacted. As you all also know, the affordable housing needs look slightly different in greater Minnesota than the metro, but we do all know this. Every county in the state has growing housing needs. With inaction at the state level, local communities will continue to feel increased pressure to help solve problems that they don't have the proper tools and resources for. The disparities in our education system will continue to grow as youth homelessness continues to rise, and Minnesota's workforce and economy will not be able to operate as optimally as possible. In all of these cases, affordable housing investments could help to solve these issues. We talk daily in this building and the one down the street about costs of programs, development, bills, etc. But there are also important costs of inaction too. As the saying goes, time is money. And the reality is the longer it takes for real and new investments in preservation and production, costs are likely to only go up, even if cost-saving measures are identified and enacted. We need everyone on this committee to be our champions. We need new and increased funding to address these needs. That includes advocating for a target for new housing investments. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. The Homes for All Coalition hopes to work with the committee to find a path forward to help meet Minnesota's affordable housing needs.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Aaron McKee. Sean McElhatton on deck, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee.
Ms. McKee, welcome. Identify yourself for the record.
My name is Erin McKee, and I'm the Community Food Systems Program Director at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy. And I'm speaking today on behalf of the large stakeholder group that's been supporting Senator Goggins' Farm to School and Early Care bill, which was Senate File 1346. Farm to School and Early Care is an issue that bridges rural and urban communities and has strong bipartisan support, as evidenced by our list of authors from this committee. These programs benefit kids, farmers, and communities, and you've heard how they're working in Cannon Falls, in Aiken, in Crookston, in Little Falls, and communities large and small all over Minnesota. We appreciate that Farm to School and Farm to Early Care are still listed in the ARE fund, though we are concerned that under the bill structuring with more earmarked funds, it represents a reduction of support for farmers and kids in our state. Timely investment could multiply the positive impacts in these communities and help more schools start across the state, getting more money to our farmers who urgently need this investment and giving kids who depend on these meals access to fresh, healthy local foods. We hope that you can keep us in mind as the bill process moves forward and look for additional opportunities to increase support for Farm to School and Farm to Early Care. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKee. Sean.
North Country Cooperative Foundation. I want to thank the chairman and members of the committee for including in this bill provisions that will give manufactured housing and workforce homeownership more broadly access to the same types of housing resources available to supporters of other types of affordable workforce housing. I'm confident that with access to those resources, we can preserve and create very cost-effective housing for the lowest income members of the Minnesota workforce. We had hoped for new money to address the critical shortage of affordable housing in Minnesota, and I hope that that might still become a possibility. But thank you for your support for manufactured housing. Thanks for your time. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McElhatton. Karen Reed, Ms. Reed, and then Sam Spates on deck.
Yes, my name is Karen Reed. I'm the Executive Director of Neighborhood Housing Development Alliance. And I'm also part of Workforce Homeownership Minnesota Coalition to increase the funding for building first-time homes for people who are seeking home ownership across the state. We are seeking a permanent permanent funding source. We appreciate that this has been recognized in the bill, but as with everyone here, we sort of need more, and we'd like to see it over the long term because housing development takes time, and we have big plans. And I know small cities, tribal organizations, CDCs, CAP agencies, agencies across Minnesota would like to address the ownership needs that are out there.
Thank you, Ms. Reed, Mr. Spades, and Mr. Jim Calkins on deck. Welcome. Identify yourself for the record, Mr. Spades.
Thank you, Chairman Westrom and members of the committee. My name is Samuel Spade. I'm a staff attorney at Homeline and Homeline's Research Director. Homeline is a statewide nonprofit organization that provides free legal advice to tenants, residential tenants throughout the state of Minnesota. Since our founding, we've advised over 230,000 residential tenants. About 20 to 25% of our calls come from greater Minnesota, with the remainder coming from the metro area in any given year. Our hotline currently averages over 1,000 clients each month. Right now, Minnesota is experiencing an affordable housing crisis, and we thank you for your continuing support. However, we are concerned that the current funding does not adequately support the many families and people in Minnesota that rent. We would ask each of you to increase this committee's target so that the committee can address the full range of housing challenges. On average, more than 85% of the households we serve are low income under HUD guidelines, and our free hotline advises renters in English, Spanish, Somali, and Hmong. The topics that renters frequently call us about have a significant impact on their lives and well-being, including health and safety issues with repairs, housing, homelessness issues. Our advice prevents evictions and helps them get these repairs, including helping them financially in other ways. The expertise that Homeline has obtained by assisting tenants throughout the state to solve their rental issues extends well beyond simple advice. We're able to, because of this expertise, give speeches, and we've given over 2,200 speeches in 32 different counties throughout Minnesota. We talk to tenants, landlords, social workers, students, and government officials. This tenant hotline is a resource that Minnesotans already rely on. One of the top referral sources to the hotline is the Minnesota Attorney General. And beginning in 2013, state funding was appropriated through the capacity building program to support this resource. And last year, the Governor's Task Force on Housing recommended Homeline as a resource that the state should support and expand. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Spades. Jim Calkins, identify yourself for the record. Forrest Sear on deck, please.
Chair Westrom and committee members, my name is James Calkins, and I am a production and landscape horticulturist and serve as the Research Information Director and the Regulatory Affairs Manager for the Minnesota Nursery and Landscape Association, MNLA. I am here today to testify on SF 2226 as a member and on behalf of the MNLA, which represents nearly 2,000 nursery growers, garden centers, and landscape service providers, and a multitude of allied industry partners and suppliers across the state of Minnesota. I am also privileged to represent the MNLA on the Minnesota Department of Agriculture Noxious Weed Advisory Committee and currently serve as the chair of that committee. Without a doubt, noxious weeds are a serious, ongoing, and growing threat to agriculture, including the nursery and landscape industry and the public we serve, and are also a serious threat to native ecosystems across the state of Minnesota. Specific to our industry, managing noxious weeds during production in garden centers and in design landscapes are a constant challenge for our membership, and the management of an increasing number of weeds that have potential to develop herbicide resistance, including palm or amaranth, is a growing concern. Noxious weeds and invasive species, including invasive plants, are also a driving force behind the need to use pesticides to control these pests, and it is hoped that an effective noxious and invasive weed program can reduce the need for pesticide applications and the potential for non-target effects, including impacts on pollinators. If we are to prevent the introduction of new noxious weeds and the spread of noxious weeds already in the state to new areas, a source of reliable and dedicated funding for noxious weed management and a more focused, strategic, and regional noxious and invasive weed management plan is needed, but funding has historically been tough to come by and limited. We appreciate the governor's budget recognizes the need for a robust, noxious, and invasive weed management program to protect agriculture, native ecosystems, and the citizens of Minnesota. And while we do not agree with everything in the House companion bill, many of these funding recommendations have been included in the House bill. We hope such funding at a level that will support meaningful results can ultimately be approved this year. We certainly support responsible government spending and believe that the approximate $1.8 million needed is reasonable to deal with the threats that we face. All we ask is that you and your legislative colleagues remain engaged in this important issue and work together with the Department of Agriculture, the governor, and local governments to support the
development of an effective noxious weed management program, including the funding needed to help ensure this success in the short and long term. Thank you, and we are certainly available to help you in any way that we can.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins. Mr. Sear next, but if there's anybody that's not on our list that came here to testify, page over to my left at the end of the table. Behind us. You want to move over there. Just let them know if you want to get on the list. We're getting closer to the end. But if there is anybody that's not on the list, if you're on the list, we've still got 4 or 5 minutes left to go. So I just let the page know, and we'll add you to the list if you came here to testify and weren't already on the list. So, Mr. Sear and Mr. Warren Hanson on deck. So, Mr. Sear, identify yourself for the record. Welcome to our committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Forrest Sear, the Government Affairs Director for the Minnesota Nursery and Landscape Association, representing about 1,200 members statewide. My colleague Jim Calkins was comprehensive about the need for noxious weed advisory task force funding, and I won't belabor that point anymore, but I do look forward to working with members of the committee to help secure that much needed funding. Thank you.
That was concise. Thank you, Mr. Sear. Mr. Hanson and Ms. Wetlaw Phillips is on deck. Mr. Hanson, welcome to our committee. Identify yourself for the record.
Greetings. My name is Warren Hanson. I'm the president of Greater Minnesota Housing Fund. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. It's good to see you again, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of Greater Minnesota Housing Fund and our housing partners producing affordable housing statewide. Just by way of background, as you may know, Greater Minnesota Housing Fund is the state's largest nonprofit affordable housing lender and investor. And we work closely with Minnesota Housing and other state agencies to help the state achieve its housing goals. And we've been doing that for about 23 years. We work closely with communities in all 87 counties of Minnesota on project financing. We make loans, grants, and equity investments in the very same projects that the State Housing Finance Agency supports. And just to put this into perspective or a scale of it, we have provided about $270 million to help preserve over 14,000 homes in Minnesota since we were founded by the McKnight Foundation and Blanton Foundation in 1996. And substantially all of our funds come from Minnesota foundations. And as you know, Minnesota is very blessed to have many philanthropic partners in the area of affordable housing and so many other areas. And they've been very generous with their commitments to make Greater Minnesota Housing Fund and others strong partners with the state. So with this philanthropic partnership in mind, I'm speaking on behalf of communities throughout Minnesota, and I'm here today to urge the committee to consider making greater investments in the production of affordable housing and the specific programs that were put forth. As you know, and has been recounted by to this committee by Minnesota Housing Commissioner Ho and many community leaders, Minnesota is facing a housing shortage and affordability crisis at every level, both rental and home ownership, and both market rate and subsidized housing, and it's threatening the ability of our communities, our businesses in those communities, and the workforce that works for these businesses, as well as our students, to thrive and to contribute to the state's economic future. As you know, that was as stated in the Minnesota Task Force on Housing, we need to produce 300,000 units of new housing stock by 2030, and that's just 10 years to produce that level of production. We're only producing half that today, and this leaves us with a dire shortage of 50,000 homes. And I know you've heard this data before, but I just want to underscore what a daunting challenge this is for all of us. And however, it's also a moment in our state's history and our state's budget situation when the state can afford to make greater investments in housing. And this is a very opportune moment when a surplus in the state's budget can be invested to produce more housing and give the state a greater return on investment in job growth, and other social and economic outcomes. So as I look at the committee budget today, I see reductions in the Challenge Program, the Rental Rehab Program, the Affordable Rental Investment Fund, or ARIF, and some additional funding for single-family programs. And I would just say that we endorse the comments made by Dan Kitzenberger from Minnesota Housing that these are the very programs that we produce rental housing with and are needed to take advantage of affordable housing tax credits and the other resources that are out there. And we can't afford right now to cut housing production or just simply shift resources from one program to the other. I would just close by saying that we stand with you as a philanthropic partner. We're continue to be a social impact investor in affordable housing. We're continually raising more private money to put into affordable housing. As I speak, we're in the process of raising $25 million for the next NOAA Impact Fund, which will be investing in the preservation of unsubsidized affordable housing to keep it stable. And this is a time when we are frankly looking to the state from philanthropy to be a greater partner, a bigger partner, so that we can continue to leverage the private dollars. I would just close again by saying that we're excited to work with you as the committee and as members of the committee. And I know we meet with you frequently, but we're available to meet with you going forward through the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. And Ms. Wetlove Phillips and Daryl Gerber on deck. And then Ms. Wetlove Phillips, welcome. Identify yourself for the record.
Mr. Chair and committee members, I'm Sue Watley Phillips. I'm the Executive Director of MICA, the Metropolitan Interfaith Council on Affordable Housing, and also Vice President of the National Coalition for the Homeless. I do have some handouts for the committee, but I'm going to run through these other things fairly quickly, so when you have a chance to look at those, that would be great. Unfortunately, the Lead Safe Homes Bill, Senate File 1798, did not have the opportunity to be heard in the Policy Committee. This was authored by Senator Little, Abler, Senator Herr, and Senator Dietzig. This is a bill to begin for us to expand our work in making sure our million homes in Minnesota that have lead in them, that were built before 1978, and 359,000 renter-occupied units that have lead in them don't continue to put.
And I'm a policy analyst for the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. And thank you for the opportunity to speak real quickly about SF 2226, and in particular Article 2, Sections 21 through 23 that deal with the definition of pastures. And kind of boil it down, the crux of our concerns is that the new definitions of pasture eliminates a reference to animal concentration and also introduces other new loopholes. This is not a hypothetical concern. It's actually based upon a case, a Supreme Court case in which an operator of a winter feedlot caused major contamination of waters by manure due to an overconcentration of animals. And there are a lot of facts to the case, but the page actually has distributed a fact sheet that has on the back of it a picture that came from this court case. And one thing to notice is that it's hard to see in the black and white version, but it does show that there are layers upon layers of manure across the entire landscape there. And another thing to notice is that there are a number of tires for feeding the animals that are distributed through there, and note the number and the concentration of those. And these are both important because in the modified definitions in section 21, it not only removes the consideration of animal concentration when looking at considering the carrying capacity of the land that is being pastured, it also adds potential loopholes, one of which is an exemption for the vicinity of supplemental feeding or watering devices. And this doesn't consider the concentration of those devices or even what vicinity means. And you can see that these concentrate the animals around those and can lead to some loopholes. The facts and common sense pretty much say that the deposition of manure is not going to be random. but it is going to be concentrated where the animals congregate. This includes many of those areas that are exempted in the legislation, so there is going to be a higher concentration of manure in those areas. Additionally, eliminating manure as a consideration as a discharge deviates from this common sense that concentrated manure on frozen land that is located in an area that could lead to runoff in the water is going to cause contamination of those waters. And so we think that it should still remain in there for consideration and just make sure that people are not actually using the practices. Just kind of one last note is I know I look like a city kid now, but I did grow up on a cattle ranch. And I have seen a lot of very different pasture management practices. Most of them good, almost all of them good, but there are people that do bad practices out there. I've also seen that these practices have evolved over time. We've learned more, we know more about the carrying capacity, how to do rotational grazing, how to manage these. And we agreed that more clarity in the definition of pastures is warranted, but suggest that it should actually be based on the latest research and knowledge coming from our land-grant universities as to what are the best management practices for pastures. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber. Mr. Macbeth will be next. And then Mary Sue Hanson on deck.
Good afternoon, Darren Macbeth, representing the Minnesota Milk Producers Association. It's good to be with you this afternoon, and the Minnesota Milk Producers Association would like to express its appreciation of the committee's efforts and the chairman's efforts to support the dairy industry and the provisions in the bill with very limited dollars this year to address the hemorrhaging that's going on in Minnesota's 2,700 dairy farms and the industry statewide. And given other concerns and criticisms of the bill, we didn't want your efforts to go overlooked in what you're trying to do toward what we've asked with the dairy industry. These 2,700 farms in the not too distant rearview mirror used to be over 5,000 farms in our state. Year over year, we're down 10% in the number of farms, losing more than one a week, almost one a day. In a term, I think I first heard Commissioner Peterson suggest that we're in the fourth year of a 3-year down cycle. And that's both the eternal optimism of dairy farming and the fact of the matter of a difficult down cycle. Dairy farming, of course, is a huge part of Minnesota's heritage, and it's a travesty that we're losing that many farms year over year, and they're a huge part of the state's economy. The economic impact, both direct and indirect, with other jobs, the tax structure, and indirect economic impacts are over $9 billion per year. So to put that in context, that's one U.S. bank stadium that the state helped build, 9 of those a year. A pretty healthy part of the economy. The dairy industry contributes $1 billion in state and local taxes to the state, $1 billion in federal taxes to the state, and when that important part of our state's economy is suffering, it makes a lot of sense to support that industry in a way that brings them back on track and helps support jobs in those parts of the economy. And we know that you're trying to do that, and this bill goes in that direction. Again, the dairy industry is searching for a hand up, not a handout. And your $3 million in the bill dedicated toward dairy modernization and innovation grants is a great step in that direction, and the $2 million towards supplementing or incentivizing participation in the dairy market, the DMC program, dairy margin coverage program with the federal farm bill is appreciated and an innovative step forward within your bill, and we thank you for that. So, in summary, again, we thank you for your creative efforts to help support the dairy industry with a difficult target. We look forward to working further in the conference committee on those efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Macbeth. Mary Sue Hanson, and then John Strophus is on deck. Is Miss Sue Hanson here? John, why don't you come on up? And that's the last of the list of testifiers. If there's anybody we missed, please get the page's attention and let us know right away, please.
Mr. Chairman.
Strophus, welcome. Identify yourself for the record.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you. My name is John Strophus. I live in Hastings, Minnesota. I'm the founder and CEO of Minnesota Hemp Farms. We were founded in 2016 as a agriculture entity focused exclusively on industrial hemp. We were the first growers in the state of Minnesota, and we're continued to be a grower every year since. We participate in many industry forums and give talks around the country to promote hemp foods, which is our primary focus with hemp grain. I'm here today to, I guess, put a face and a spotlight on some of the opening comments that Commissioner Peterson referenced with regard to the hemp program. First of all, I tell folks across the country that Minnesota is one of the best places in the country to grow hemp. The reason for that is because we have very limited regulation, we have a very open program, and we have an excellent agriculture support structure with AURI and some other entities across the state. Industrial hemp is a food product primarily. The United States is the largest importer of hemp goods in the world, and most of that is going for food purposes. We're also blessed that Minnesota happens to be considered the Wall Street of food. Also, in a very repressed agriculture climate, in our other farming operation, I should say, we farm about 900 acres here in Minnesota and in Wisconsin, corn, soybeans, alfalfa. We're also a beef producer with direct-to-consumer marketing. We've been marketing hemp-fed beef, by the way, for the last 2 years. But it's very important, I think, that the committee understands the importance of the hemp industry as it's growing, especially on the backs of the 2018 Farm Bill, which has ended, or basically ended prohibition for industrial hemp growing and treats hemp now like corn and soybeans, which I remind our soybean growers like myself frequently with our lack of market or exclusive market with China. And hemp is a great alternative crop for that. We work very closely with the department. They are instrumental in reducing my phone calls and emails from currently 50 a day, which probably is 200 or 300 taken by the state resources working in the program. Growers are looking, or interested parties are interested in understanding what they can and can't do in the hemp program, how to go about it, and the department fields all those calls. So with lack of funding, I think there's really two choices. One is that fees are increased to a point that are already a bit cost prohibitive and disincenting more serious growers from growing industrial hemp. We provide a platform and a market for those growers, and so we need contracted growers to fill our supply chain, which currently we sell about a semi-load of processed hemp goods per month, and we need growers to participate, and we need fees to be reasonable. The alternative to fees is that we don't have anybody there to answer the phone, and we have essentially an unregulated program, which I'm generally supportive of, but I think in this industry we need to have a bit of oversight as we adopt the USDA rules provision coming here in 2019. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Strophus. With that, that would conclude our testifying list, and thank you all for your attendance and comments on the omnibus bill. With that, first we need to adopt the A1 amendment, which is the delete all, and then So with that, members, to get the bill into shape, it needs to be to work off or comment or amend further. The chair would move the A1 amendment, the Toledo amendment. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion prevails. To the bill with the A1 amendment, further discussion, members? And while anybody's warming up, I do have an A2 amendment, so I'll start with the A2 amendment and move the A2 amendment. Members, what the A2 amendment does is deals with some of the Ashby co-op elevator situation that we had a hearing on earlier this year. We've heard about that in some elevators that have left farmers hanging high and dry when the elevator closes and there's not enough cash or grain to cover what their obligations were. The stakeholder group in the Department of Ag, we thank them for leading the stakeholder group and the charge on that issue. This amendment, to a great extent, has the recommendations, some of the recommendations in from the Department of Ag and the stakeholders group. We would add grain buyers to start having one inspection a year, where currently they're not subject to the inspection. And we need to start making sure that those entities, at least there's some sort of check to know where the grain is being held or stored. In the Ashby situation, there was on paper, and everyone was being led to believe that there was grain stored off-site. As you recall the testimony from the current attorney that's working with bankruptcy, when they got to looking for the off-site grain, they found out that there was no grain. And so we would add that inspection. The other thing, members, that it would do is it would enhance the reports and the audit, an audit being required of the co-ops. If they do over $5 million in grain sales, then there would be a financial review. If they're under $5 million, that they would submit to the Department of Ag. And those documents that they submit, and another addition that I got on this amendment, and is that we have the board members also sign those documents, and it's not just a manager that's submitting them. The intent or the idea here being more engaged board members and making sure that in a case that I mentioned in the Ashby situation, it doesn't seem like the board maybe knew everything that was going on and fraudulent documents were being submitted, and this would help enhance the ability that it would be caught sooner, or it would be caught locally with more people touching the documents and reports before they get submitted, and more people would have a light shown on the issue. Lastly, it would also have the Department of Ag annually provide the board members with a notification or a document that gets prepared about the fiduciary obligation of the board members. So try to enhance and bring a better light to the serious legal obligation that board members have, a fiduciary obligation, and remind them of that each year. New board members come on, certainly it's helpful for them to realize as well, and that's what this amendment would do. Mr. Knopf, did I forget anything in my description?
Mr. Chairman, that was a very good description. The only issue that I might want to add to your description is that under the grain buyers law and Chapter 223, we've not required inspections in the past or examinations, and this will require an annual examination for those grain buyers, with also with a fee that they pay for that to cover the cost of the examination, similar to what the elevators or the grain storage facilities. We're putting them on kind of an equal footing, and that wasn't sure if that came up with an explanation. Otherwise, it was a great job.
Very, very good point, members. It would have a similar fee structure as what elevators currently are already subject to, that the grain buyers would be subject to paying based on the size. There's a scale, and my understanding is that it's part. This is similar to what the stakeholders group brought back to us. Is that correct, Mr. Knopf?
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay. Very good. Members, questions on that amendment? I'm wondering, Commissioner Peterson, would you have any comments you'd want to weigh in on this amendment before we finish discussion and vote? Don't need to put you on the spot.
Mr. Chair.
Welcome to this place.
Thank you.
Welcome. Identify yourself for the record, and just any comments you would have on this language would be welcome, and then we can finish discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Winnie Place. I serve as Assistant Commissioner at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. No, we don't have any additional comments. Thank you so much for taking the Grain Advisory Committee's recommendations into consideration and adding them to the bill.
Very good. Thanks, Ms. Place. Further comments or questions, members? Having none, all those in favor of the A2 amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion prevails. Other discussion on members' amendments? Senator Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing everyone to come forward this afternoon and make comments on your bill. I really appreciate that. With that, Mr. Chair, I would like to offer the A18 amendment.
Senator Sparks moves the A18 amendment. What's your amendment do?
Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. And I think we heard testimony earlier from Commissioner Grove from the Department of Employment and Economic Development. I thought he did a really eloquent job speaking to the importance of the broadband grant program. I do want to thank you, Mr. Chair, and your leadership for the $30 million one-time investment in the border-to-border broadband program. Unfortunately, I think we all know that parts of rural Minnesota remain under-connected with broadband speeds needed for education, business, and economic development. It's my belief that it's time to make this important investment to boost Minnesota's rural economy. That's why I support the governor's recommendation of $35 million in 2020 and $35 million additional investment of $35 million in 2021 for the border-to-border broadband grant program in Minnesota. I think I've explained the amendment, and with that, I would just ask for a motion.
Any discussion? Senator Dietzig. Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess, you know, the reality of it is we've been given our target, and we don't have the authority to increase our target at this point in time. So if we are to move a bill out that meets our target, I was just wondering where the anticipated reductions would be made to cover this additional expenditure.
Good question, Senator Sparks. Is there any area of the bill to meet our targets you would propose your $5 million would come from?
Mr. Chair, maybe council.
Senator Dietzig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe council can address this, but my understanding is I know you like to stay balanced in committee, but my understanding is in committee we don't need to be balanced.
Senator Dietzig, my understanding is we do have to stay balanced coming out of committee, and if we don't stay balanced, I can assure you what will happen at the next step. They will decide to do the surgery instead of us doing the surgery. Mr. Knopf, you have a comment on this?
Mr. Chair and members, I've never worked with a finance committee like this that didn't send a balanced bill out. I've heard of a few over the years that didn't, and they were basically sent back to redo the bill. Every committee I've worked with, in fact, most of my chairs have ruled amendments like this out of order because it doesn't meet our target. You can't go to the finance committee with a bill that doesn't meet target.
Senator Dietzig, that's my understanding as well. If you've got maybe a memo or a note from the finance committee different or rules, I'm sure would be welcome.
Mr. Chair, I
find the $5 million.
I don't, and so unfortunately I was misinformed. But I think we have heard where this is a priority to everybody, and I understand you have to make hard choices, but I think we do need to make some choices. I'm sure I could, randomly pick 30 million, but I would like to actually vote on the amendment and would actually like a roll call recorded in the journal, and then after that I can go back and we can adjust accordingly. I also have some information for the pages. If they could pass out, it's just a fact sheet, just as a reminder to anybody that it just shows how much it is important and it's a matter of priority. If we, in this they so eloquently stated, this helps rural Minnesota, but I think being a representative from Minneapolis, it also helps businesses in my community that are trying to communicate with people in rural Minnesota. So with that, I ask for a roll call and that be recorded in the journal.
Senator Dietzig, Senator Sparks, I certainly appreciate the effort and the push to try to get more for rural broadband, and that would be my hope as well. Unfortunately, as targets come out and the squeeze starts coming down on every committee, and we live within a budget that has a ceiling, I don't know where we get 40 million more, other than take it out of the current budget of some sort. We have to do that to have a balanced bill come out. But Senator Drahan had a comment.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Sparks and Dietzig, for bringing up this topic. We've all worked pretty hard on broadband, and I think we all would love to see more funding for broadband. Chair, if you could answer this, our target was what? 30 million?
Senator Drahan, our target for broadband was 30 million of additional dollars.
Well, other than that, our committee was given a zero target, wasn't it?
That's correct, Senator Drahan.
So we are spending every penny that we got on broadband. Would that be a fair assessment?
That's correct, Senator Drahan.
And I think, and we've had this discussion before, I have a couple other bills on broadband, and it's hard when broadband straddles a couple of committees like it does. But I think if we're serious about broadband, we have to look at other technologies to speed up the process and the rollout of broadband. In one bill I have kind of cuts the wire, if you will. And I hope we have time to have a robust discussion on that after Easter break, after deadline. I know it's late this year, but I just wanted to thank the amendment. I don't think we have the funds to do it. But I agree that it's very important. I wish we had the money to do it. I think everybody here does. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drahan. Senator Weber and then Senator Prince.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point in time, and I go back to my early years here my early years, this really started to sound bad, but anyway, in my years as the minority, we were never allowed to make an amendment that threw our budget out of balance. And while I really don't want to do this, there's only one fund that, quite frankly, is large enough to absorb. Well, there's a couple funds that are large enough to absorb this right now. But quite frankly, if we want to pursue the money, and I agree with Senator Drahan, we'd all like to see more. But quite frankly, if we're going to produce a budget that's balanced and we want to put the increased funding in, then we're going to have to take it out of the Department of Ag's administrative accounts and to balance it. And I don't really want to do that, but I will make that amendment to the amendment in order to and we can decide which do we want worse. Do we want the agency to have their money, or do we want to have the extra funding for broadband?
Senator Weber, that's an oral amendment to the amendment.
It is.
Mr. Knopf, can you offer guidance on the language for the oral amendment? Senator Sparks.
Mr. Chairman, thank you both, Senator Drahan and Senator Weber. I understand this is a very important program. I think that, the commissioner spoke, it's not a Democrat or Republican issue. I understand that you are dealing with targets, but I think it's about priorities too. But at this point, I would be willing to withdraw the amendment with the understanding that going forward, we know that the governor has a strong position on this and the House. And we all know how it works around here, that numbers can change down the road too. So with that, I'll withdraw the A18 amendment.
Certainly. Senator Sparks withdraws the A18 amendment. Senator Sparks, certainly any place we can find additional dollars as it goes on. I too recognize and support this rural broadband. I appreciate you bringing the issue up. If there's an area that you think we could squeeze it out of, certainly I'm open to discuss that. It's a tough squeeze, as you well recognize as well. Thank you. Senator Frentz, did you have a comment?
I did, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank you and everybody on the committee for the work put in on the bill so far. I too have amendments that I would like to bring before this committee, and this question may be more for Mr. Knopf. But I think as members, our point would be, are we saying that there is a rule in the Senate that the committee cannot leave the bill higher than the target, or simply that it has not been done before? I think that's an important distinction for those of us who would like to put these amendments out and ask members if they're willing to support them. Members are free, of course, to say that they don't wish to support an amendment that puts the bill out of balance. But I do think that people here, whether the topic is noxious weeds or hemp or lab equipment or ag emergency preparedness, would like to know if we're able to put the bill out of here with more than a $30 million target. And if we are, which members are willing to support that and which ones aren't. So I guess what I'm asking is, are we saying there's a rule that forbids these amendments, or simply that we haven't done it before? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Knopf, I'll let you answer that.
Mr. Chair, Senator Friends, there's not a rule that's not similar to what you have on the floor with omnibus bills, but it is enforced by the Finance Committee, and generally you're going to be back here on a different date cutting stuff out to meet the target, because they won't hear the bill if it's out of balance. And so it's enforced by the Finance Committee. All the chairs that I've worked with in budget bills over 35 years have enforced that in their committees or divisions that were providing funding recommendations to the Finance Committee. It's more of a custom and practice than it is a rule. Well, it isn't a rule, but it is enforced by the Finance Committee, and they would send you back and tell you to get down to what was supposed to be.
Senator Franks, follow up on that.
Thank you, Mr.
And as Senator Russ tried to school me a week or two ago in the Rules Subcommittee, she was clear in saying custom, as I was pursuing her on some rules that we were talking about changing, and she didn't have a rule for some of the things I was questioning her on, but she was quick to remind me that custom and usage is the rule, and that's what gave the precedent to not allowing some of the things on the Senate floor that she was a staunch defender of the current rule, which didn't exist, but custom and usage was the priority rule, as she well stated. But Senator Frentz, I have told the Finance Chair we will bring out a balanced bill, and I would rather we put a bill together here that is balanced, rather than have it sent back or remanded, if you will, lawyer to lawyer, to our committee to redo, or worse yet, have the Finance Committee do surgery on our bill, and then it's out of our control completely. So those would be the kind of
Mr.
options.
Chairman, the idea of lawyer to lawyer sort of bothers me, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and no, thanks to all the members. I think my question was answered by Mr. Knopf. Mr. Knopf, I haven't even been here 35 months, so I respect the work that you put into your experience. I do think it's important for our committees to understand what the boundaries are and what they're not. And if I'm not mistaken, this
we're at somewhat of a quandary. We do have amendments, and I think this committee in general, we usually get along and try to work together, and I've appreciated that, working with across the aisle on a variety of different issues, because I think these are some very, housing is a very core issue broadband is an economic issue that impacts the state, and agriculture is an issue that is, I don't even know the total. I used to know percentages off the top of my head, but it impacts a lot of people, not just, and again, representing Minneapolis, it's not just the farmers in rural Minnesota, the farm economy impacts the metro as well, and I think sometimes people forget that, from the different businesses and companies to the food we eat. So, you know, we have some amendments here just to kind of, they're all based on the bills that we've heard, and you know, I admit it's very hard to do things when you have a zero target, and it is very tight because there's a lot of important stuff in the bill. And, but we have some other amendments, so we could just offer them and discuss them, and you all can vote them down, or how do you want us to handle this? Because I think at least some of the stuff that we have prepared for amendments, I think are important issues that I think people need to know, you know, where everybody stands on those issues.
And Senator Dietzig, I'm happy to have amendments and want people to bring them. The only issue would be you have to bring them forward that are balanced, or we'll have to balance them before we would vote on them. And a little the same, you can decide what other fund to take it out of, or somebody else on the committee will. Just like if we send an unbalanced bill out here, we'll be passing that committee decision on to another committee instead if we don't want to make it ourselves. I realize that the struggle. I mean, this is not an easy balance being walked. But so I don't know if that answers your question. If you can just find where you would rather take it from, I'm happy to take the amendments. Otherwise, we'd have to get them balanced before we adopt them on the bill if they were to prevail.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or we could just agree to disagree if they need to be balanced at this point, and you could just, you know, choose to vote them down.
Senator Dietzig, if you. So Senator Dietzig, as Mr. Knopf is reminding me, the chair is the one to enforce the target, so I realize I've got to be the bad guy here. But if you want to move them, we will have to balance them before we can vote on them if we're going to make a final vote.
Chair, thanks, Senator Dre. If I could, I would like to just know what proposals you have and the dollar amount, and not take an official action on it. It would be nice for me to know. You know, there's things in here I would like to have, or things that aren't in here that I wish were in there too. But if we could just maybe go through each amendment, describe it real quick, and the dollar amount that we're hoping for, and as we negotiate, move through the process, we can keep that in mind. That would be helpful for me, Chair, and Senator Dietzig. Thank you.
Senator Dietzig, do you want to offer an amendment, or do you have an amendment?
Mr. Chair, thank you for having a sidebar conversation over here. We would like to have the discussion, and then you can, you know, offer the amendment, and you can choose to declare it out of order, and then we'll have the discussion and decide, you know, how to go from there. Is okay?
You got to go ahead and offer it, Senator Dietzig. Just know that if you don't find a place to pull it from, I'm going to have to work with the committee and find a place to take it from. So I'd rather not have to do that if we put in that position, but I can't send a bill out of balance out here, or we've got bigger problems. So go ahead, Senator Dietzig, which amendment would you like first off?
Mr. Chair.
Senator Regan.
Yes, I mentioned the amendment earlier that deals with the tails. There's a cut of $94,000 in the 22-23 biennium fiscal years for the Northern Crops Institute. And I just want to bring that forward. The Northern Crops Institute is located up in Fargo, North Dakota at NTSU.
So Senator Regan, let me just move what's the number of the amendment.
the number is the 812 amendment.
Senator Reagan moves the 812 amendment. Continue on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Northern Crops Institute, which this amendment deals with, is a collaborative effort between 4 states. It's North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Montana. And it's designed to promote and develop and market crops grown in this 4-state region. Their mission is to support regional agriculture and value-added processing by conducting educational and technical programs. It includes laboratory facilities, a feed production center, a pilot-scale flour mill, a pasta processing plant, and a food processing plant. It's been very, very important for the promotion and development of agriculture in our area. Minnesota producers have gotten behind this as well, including trade associations, agricultural businesses who know the important role that this institute plays in the success of Minnesota agriculture. And there are many groups that have joined the Minnesota Department of Agriculture in investing in this, including groups like the Minneapolis Grain Exchange, Minnesota Corn Growers Association, Northern Plains Potato Growers Association, the Red River Valley Sugar Beet Growers, Minnesota Soybean Research and Promotion Council, the Minnesota Wheat Growers Association. So we're not asking for a lot of money here. It's just it's $94,000. It's a small investment. Actually, the North Dakota legislature and private donations pays for most of it. But the states of South Dakota and Montana have historically provided a funding source that's similar to what we have in Minnesota. I think it sends a good message to them as well if we continue supporting this. Because again, it's a very small amount of money, but it does have a big impact in our area. And that's the reason I bring it forward.
Senator Reagan, is there an area of the tails that you would suggest this comes out of as we contemplated? I mean, that gets to be the issue. What we funded in this bill is a one-time for this biennium. They would certainly, like many others, be able to come back and make a request again.